The Masque of the Red Death. Personalized by the motion picture screen's Prince of Horror, Vincent Price.
Garotto.
No, I beg of you. Mercy, mercy.
With the devil's own darling, Hazel Court.
Lord Satan, send me a demon, so I may know I'm to be your wife.
And a lost, virginal angel of innocence, Jane Asher.
I want to help save your soul so you can join me in the glories of hell.
No, never.
She's a woman cursed by Satan's seneschal, whose very existence turns the white rose blood red.
Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, pearls.
Lavishly, he plants his corrupting seeds of sin, spreading living terror that not even the unsullied can escape. Nor can one who craves all the forbidden pleasures of the depraved.
Each man creates his own heaven, his own hell.
Let me see your face.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me.
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first.
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we invite you to be our guest as we attend The Masque of the Red Death from 1964.
The Masque of the Red Death was directed by Roger Corman from a screenplay by Charles Beaumont and R. Wright Campbell, which is based on The Masque of the Red Death and Hop Frog by Edgar Allan Poe. The film was produced by Roger Corman and George Willoughby for Anglo Amalgamated and Alta Vista Productions and distributed by American International Pictures.
The Masque of the Red Death stars Vincent Price as Prince Prospero, Hazel Court as Juliana, his consort, Jane Asher as Francesca, a peasant girl, David Weston as Gino, Francesca's lover, Nigel Green as Ludovico, Francesca's father, John Westbrook as the Red Death, uncredited.
Also appearing are Patrick Magee as Alfredo, Paul Whitsun-Jones as Scarlatti, Robert Brown as a guard, David Davies as lead villager, Sarah Brackett as grandmother, Skip Martin as Hop Toad, and Verina Greenlaw as Esmeralda, the tiny dancer.
The Masque of the Red Death opens with credits. The title comes up and mad horns play and tambourines rattle. The screen fills with blood red with titles in white. And then the movie proper opens.
A hooded man in a red cloak sits against a tree. He beckons to an old woman who's passing by. Grandmother, he says. She approaches him. He tells her to come closer. He presents her with a white rose, but he waves his hand over it and it turns blood red. He tells her to take it to the village and to tell her people that the day of deliverance is at hand. She accepts the rose, bows, and leaves.
Then we see men on horseback riding in front of a tiny carriage, approaching a very minimalist village. They cry out, "Make way for Prince Prospero," as they approach. A man dashes in front of the procession, just in time to save a toddler about to be flattened underfoot.
This young man is Gino, and he pulls the young'un out of the way in the nick of time. Prince Prospero exits the carriage and announces that he's come personally to thank the villagers for this year's harvest and to invite them to a feast to be held in a fortnight. Gino snarks, "Where you throw us the scraps from your table as if we were dogs." "Exactly," says Prospero. "But these dogs have a loud bark and show their teeth. Why?"
Gino tells him about the old woman's prophecy of deliverance. "From your hands," pipes up another man. This is Ludovico. "Well then," says Prospero, "shouldn't you be on your knees thanking me?" He signals to his men to knock them down to their knees and orders them to be garroted.
Francesca, a peasant girl in the village, seeing this, begs Prospero for mercy. His guards bring her to the ground as well, but Prospero motions for them to let her go. "The girl was addressing me," he says. Then to Francesca he asks, "What do you want of me?" "Forgive them." But Prospero says they've defied him. He can't just let that go unpunished. But he's going to show a little mercy with his judgment. He'll let Francesca choose which of the two men must die.
Holy Sophie's choice. She tells us that one man is her father and one her love. A man comes out from behind Prospero, crowing at this delicious entertainment. This is Alfredo. He seems especially taken with young Francesca's innocence, asking, "Have those eyes known sin?" "They will," promises Prospero, and he insists that Francesca make the choice.
From somewhere in the village, a woman screams. Prospero looks annoyed, and when the scream is heard again, he asks, "Do I have to take care of everything myself?" He goes to a cottage and enters. Inside is the old woman from earlier in the film. Her face is covered in hives, a victim of the Red Death. She dies as Prospero gazes upon her.
He says the Red Death. He exits the cottage. He goes back to Ludovico, Francesca, and Gino and asks, was that the old woman with the prophecy? Gino tells him yes. He asks, did any of them touch her? All say no. He tells the three that they are coming back to the castle with him. His men will take the 2 prisoners, and Francesca will ride with him in the tiny carriage. Then he tells his men to burn the village to the ground.
Gino protests. They can't burn down the village. Winter is coming and they'll have no place to live. But Prospero says, after all, they did tell him that this is their day of deliverance.
Then the barely there village is torched as Prospero and his men ride off. Villagers try to escape their burning homes, and one of them goes up in flames.
Prospero and his men return to the castle, and Prospero, taking Francesca by the hand, orders his couriers to contact the nobles from various nearby cities and to invite them to come at once, but to avoid the village of Catania if they want to be allowed to enter.
In a bath chamber, Francesca is stripped and thrown into a bath against her will by some of Prospero's ladies. As she lies in the tub like a wet cat, Prospero and his consort Juliana enter. He's chuckling because she's attempting to hide from his gaze. She begs again to know about Gino and her father.
Prospero doesn't answer, but instead asks her about the cross that Francesca wears around her neck, and asks if it's just for decoration or is she a believer in the Christian faith. Francesca says she believes, so Prospero tells her to remove it, and he forbids her from wearing it in the castle.
She looks at Juliana like, is he serious? But Prospero holds out his hands and she gives it to him. Juliana complains to Prospero about the peasant girl bathing in her tub. He promises to get her another room and tells her to dress Francesca in one of her finest gowns, despite them being nowhere near the same size. Juliana pouts, but Prospero ignores her, telling Juliana to then instruct Francesca in the ways of the court.
Francesca, still covering herself in the bath, asks again about her father. Oh yes, says Prospero, your father. He and your lover are being quartered in a nice warm place. He exits, and Juliana tells Francesca not to expect any sympathy from her. Francesca did steal Juliana's room after all. Francesca asks if she will do as Prospero asked. Yes, says Juliana, as we all must do. Then know this, says Francesca, if my father or Gino are killed, I shall die, as well as Prince Prospero.
And now we're at a wild party. Alfredo is there pestering a woman, saying that he wants to speak on the anatomy of terror. Prospero appears out of nowhere to say, what do you know of terror? He leads his guests into the main hall, and, walking in a circle around them, expounds on what terror is for a few moments, before saying, not to dwell on it. The knowledge of terror is vouchsafed with a precious few, whatever that means. And then the clock strikes, startling everybody.
Then Prospero introduces, for his guests' amusement, the dancer Esmeralda. Esmeralda, who is supposed to be a little person, but is portrayed by a girl of about 5 or 6 years of age, is escorted into the room by a band of musicians and Hoptoad, who is a man of diminutive stature.
Esmeralda dances as Prospero and Alfredo gawp at her. Hoptoad keeps a protective eye out, as Alfredo is clearly more than a little interested. Prospero says that he knows Alfredo is horny for every female member of his household. I know it's supposed to be an adult woman there, but it is a little girl, and it's just so weird to watch them ogling her. She looks every bit a small child. Alfredo tells Prospero that he's a hypocrite because he also loves corrupting innocents. Prospero corrects him. He's instructing, not corrupting.
Esmeralda continues her dance, but when she accidentally kicks over Alfredo's chalice of wine, he smacks her to the ground.
She pulls a shocked Pikachu face when she knocks it over.
Hoptoad, glaring at Alfredo, goes to help Esmeralda up. If she were full size, she'd drown us all in wine, grumbles Alfredo.
There's the same amount of wine in the cup, no matter who knocks it over. What a dope. Hoptoad also went for the knife on his belt, but obviously thought better of it. He can't take everybody, but that was his first instinct. He wants to protect Esmeralda. Prospero says that his first go at novelty has failed, and so promises that on the stroke of midnight on the Sabbath, there will be a masquerade. He tells everyone there to help themselves to the outfits in the wardrobes of the castle.
But he begs of them, even for the humor of it, do not wear red. At this, he splashes his wine into Alfredo's face. Alfredo starts grumbling again, saying that Prospero has gone too far. He is not without influence and power. Against the Red Death, asks Prospero, and he warns that the Red Death has come to the village, and even now it lays waste to the countryside. So they should all consider themselves lucky that they are safe in his castle and under his protection.
Then Francesca arrives. She's wearing virginal white and is trailed by Juliana. Prospero introduces her to the guests as the Lady Francesca and takes her hand. He walks around to the individual party guests, calls them a particular animal, and then makes them act as said animal. And they don't seem to mind.
He calls one man a pig and tells him to be one, and the man starts snorting and falls to the ground and rolling around on the floor. A man is laughing at this, and Prospero tells him he's as insignificant as a worm. The man immediately falls to the floor and starts slithering around. He goes to a woman, telling her she laughs like a braying jackass, and she immediately puts 2 glasses up to her head like a donkey's ears. Then she too starts crawling about the floor. Prospero tells another man to mount the jackass and ride it to market, and the man happily obliges. Then Prospero tells the remaining guests to enjoy their time with the animals.
And it looks like on Arrested Development, the Bluths doing their chicken impressions. If you've ever seen that. Prospero wishes aloud for more exotic entertainments, but then we see Alfredo's stony face. Clearly, he wishes for revenge.
Prospero leaves his guests and takes Francesca to another room. It's very yellow. He tells Francesca that his father imprisoned a friend of his in this room for 3 years. When he was released, he couldn't look at the sun or a daffodil. Then he opens another door to a very violet room.
Prospero talks about how his family has always been interested in how the human mind works to open the door that separates us from our Creator. Francesca tries to say that you don't need to open anything to find God except your heart, but Prospero chides her for being a believer. He calls her gullible and asks how she could see God in a world with so much death, pestilence, war, etc. Francesca counters that there's also love and life and hope.
Prospero believes there's very little hope, and he decided long ago that if there ever was a God, he is long since dead. Something now rules in his place. Prospero takes Francesca into another room, a white room, and there's a black door there.
Prospero jumps in front of the door and forbids Francesca from ever entering, Bluebeard style, for now, until she's ready. He sidles up next to her, as if to kiss her, but then tells her that she can see Gino tomorrow, but for now, she should sleep. And then the camera zooms in on that black door.
Prospero enters the main hall where Juliana is waiting. He asks her what's on her mind. Same as you, I suspect, she says. The peasant girl. She has a perfect faith, says Prospero. As do I, says Juliana. In you and all you believe in. Juliana says she is finally ready to join Prospero in his quest for the truth. And Prospero is a little amused. All it took was a little jealousy for Juliana to agree to the rites of ceremony just to secure her position with him. He wonders if Francesca will ever be ready to make that same choice.
Now we see Francesca asleep in Juliana's bedchamber. She hears a noise, and it wakes her up. She hears the clarinets of trepidation as she gets up, grabs a lit candle, and looks around the room. She spies something that looks like blood on the table next to her bed and gasps, dropping her candle. Then she hears Prospero's voice chanting something in Latin, and she follows after donning a robe.
She walks out into the hall, following the sound of Prospero's voice, down the stairs, and through a doorway. She goes through the yellow room, to the violet room, to the white room, and to the black door. She opens the door and finds Juliana, sitting with a raven, bathed in a red glow. Lying nearby, his eyes closed, is Prospero. She reaches for his face, and Prospero's eyes spring open. Francesca screams and runs back out into the hall and towards her room.
She runs into Alfredo wearing a demon mask and glaring at her menacingly. Alfredo asks if he startles her and goes towards her, and she dashes to safety as he chuckles mirthlessly.
The next day, Prospero is showing off his falconry skills to Francesca. He tells her how a falcon is trained. Its eyes are sewn shut until it is obedient out of necessity, much like Francesca and her faith in the cross. Prospero says his master has him look around the world with eyes wide open. Your master? Asks Francesca. Satan, says Prospero, the lord of flies. Then he mouths, a devil.
Francesca is shocked. A horn sounds and Prospero goes out on the battlements to greet a new arrival. He asks who goes there. It's Senor Scarlatti, who says he's an invited guest and demands to be admitted immediately. Prospero tells him exactly to whom he is speaking, and then tells Scarlatti to beat it. He came too late and has now passed through the plague lands. No matter how much Scarlatti begs, it does no good. So Scarlatti hauls his wife out of the carriage and offers her to him, but Prospero said he already had the dubious pleasure of her company.
Been there, done that, says Prospero. Only momentarily phased, Scarlatti begs that Prospero spare him the Red Death in the name of friendship, and Prospero obliges by picking up a crossbow and shooting Scarlatti in the throat. Francesca turns away, disgusted.
Then he tosses the wife a dagger that she might use to spare herself the Red Death. At the same time in the dungeon, the guard tosses a sword between Gino and Ludovico so he can train them in weaponry. They are to fight each other to the death for Prospero's amusement.
Gino is refusing to fight, but he does change his tune when the guard charges at him with his sword. Gino clumsily plays defense as Prospero and Francesca walk into the dungeon. Stop him, says Francesca. Gino knows nothing of fighting.
Thanks, honey.
He seems to be learning fairly quickly, says Prospero. Indeed, Gino corners the guard and forces him to drop his sword. Prospero says the greatest swordsman would not fear the second greatest, but would fear the worst, as that one would be unpredictable.
Francesca gasps and the fight is over. Gino is prevented from embracing Francesca at sword point, but they tell each other that they're both fine.
Ludovico also says that he will not fight his friend, and Gino doesn't believe that Prospero would want to torture them to death. What would be the fun in that? And Prospero admits that Gino has given him something to think about. Next, Prospero escorts Francesca on a tour of the torture chamber. On the way, he tells her of an ancestor of his who tortured over 600 men, women, and children in the name of Christianity, and Francesca's god of love.
Francesca asks, isn't Satan the god of hate? No, says Prospero. He's the god of freedom and knowledge. Prospero wants to initiate Francesca into the satanic rites, but she's afraid. He claims he would never hurt her. He just wants to deliver her soul to his dark master,
so that she may join him in the glories of hell.
She doesn't want that, but Prospero once again offers to lead her into Satan's velvet darkness.
Now we're back in the black room, where Juliana is performing a rite to Satan, her betrothed. The ritual ends with her bending her chest with an inverted cross, and she asks Satan to send her a demon of her very own. Alfredo is wandering the castle because he can't sleep, and neither can Hoptoad. They bump into each other and start to converse. Alfredo asks why Hot Toad isn't enjoying the company of Esmeralda. Hot Toad says he prefers the company of a full-sized woman. Alfredo inquires as to whether that's possible for someone with his stature. Hot Toad tells Alfredo that Prospero rides him with some from time to time. He's a good master, but others might be better.
Yes, he's looking for new employment for Esmeralda's sake. He confesses to Alfredo that he has a great idea for Prospero's masquerade. Whatever costumes the revelers wear, they're going to be obviously human. Alfredo says he's coming as a demon, but Hot Toad has a wild idea. Why not come as a great ape?
Alfredo is intrigued, but can't imagine he'll find a costume in time. But Hot Toad tells Alfredo that such a costume exists in the castle, in a room of playthings that Prospero had long since forgotten.
He describes how awesome it will be when Prospero and the others see him, and then says, not only that, there's more. But we transition to the next scene before he can tell us.
Francesca is lying in bed, staring at the door. Something is scratching at the other side of the door. Francesca gets up, and Juliana walks in. Francesca is relieved. Then she notices the burn mark on Juliana's chest. What's that? She asks. It is Satan's love, replies Juliana. Prospero did that to you? Asks Francesca. No, I did it, says Juliana. And now there's only one more rite to perform, and she will be wed to Satan.
Francesca fails to ask what that last rite might be, which I would want to know, but instead tells Juliana she's horrified that Juliana just gave away her soul.
Juliana continues that once the final rite is performed, all of her innocence will be gone and she could have Prospero to herself. But there's one potential problem, and that's Francesca. But if she were to go...
Francesca jumps at this. She would gladly leave the dubious safety of the castle, but how? Juliana provides her with the dungeon key and tells her to make her way down there to retrieve her men and leave the castle. She has to do it alone, though, but Juliana tells her that she already knows the way, and Francesca dashes off.
Francesca goes down to the dungeon, and she sneaks past the guards, who are busy playing cards. She walks past several prisoners under various degrees of torture before she finds the cell holding Gino and her father. She tells them that they must hurry to the battlement. A guard there will help them, but as they're leaving, the guards hear them, and they go after them. It's a short battle, and the guards are quickly taken out.
The trio make their way to the battlement, where Prospero, disguised as a guard, is waiting for her with his guards. Juliana betrayed me, says Francesca. Prospero says no, Juliana betrayed me, then tells her that Ludovico and Gino must fight to the death tomorrow for the sin of killing those 3 guards while escaping. And now it's time for a feast. A disgustingly greasy boar's head is brought in to the banquet tables.
Prospero is seated at a grand table, flanked by Francesca and Juliana. Alfredo also has a seat at the table. Prospero announces to his attending guests that Scarlatti and his wife will not be joining them this evening, as he had failed to obey Prospero's orders. At that, Prospero sticks a dagger into the table. Prospero promises that all of his guests will be safe from the Red Death, provided they follow the rules. Shows of faith will not be tolerated. As he is speaking, he plunges 4 more daggers into the table. Then he announces that tonight's entertainment is set to begin. He has the guards escort in Ludovico and Gino. He tells the crowd that they believed in a god who preaches love thy neighbor, so they refuse to fight each other to the death. He then tells them that of the 5 daggers on the table, 1 has been dipped into a poison that kills in 5 seconds. Ludovico and Gino are to take turns cutting into their forearms with the daggers.
Ludovico goes first. He slashes his forearm, waits 5 seconds, and does not die. Then Gino takes his turn. Again, that dagger was not poisoned. Then Ludovico takes the 3rd dagger, slashes his arm, again to no effect. Everyone at the table watches lustfully as Gino takes the second to last dagger. He slashes his arm, waits, and nothing happens. Ludovico takes the last dagger and lunges for Prospero, who lunges back, driving his sword into Ludovico's gut. Prospero claims that the game was played incorrectly, and now both of them must die.
You're a madman, cries Gino. Perhaps, says Prospero, but I shall live and you will be dead.
Francesca screams no. Prospero looks at her and relents, and says Gino can live, but he must leave the castle and go back to the plague town. Francesca again protests he will die out there, but Prospero's not changing his mind this time. Gino is led away by the guards and vows that he will see Francesca again.
Francesca goes to Prospero and asks that she be sent away with Gino. You? Says Prospero. No, I don't think so. Then Prospero tells the attending guests that they are to go back to their rooms until it is time for the masquerade. They aren't to show themselves in their costumes before midnight. Francesca follows Prospero and tells him that if he lets Gino stay, she will let him do with her whatever he wishes. You would destroy yourself for him? Asks Prospero. Yes, says Francesca. You almost made me doubt, smiles Prospero.
As Prospero ponders what he might do to Francesca, Juliana calls out that she's ready. Despite what Francesca offered Prospero, Gina is deposited outside the castle walls. He tears off through the forest, chased by ghosts and banshees and other screaming demons. He stumbles and falls at the feet of the Red Death. He says, "My God." "Who is your God?" intones Red Death. "The true one," says Gino.
Gino tells the man in red that he must get back to the castle to rescue Francesca, but wonders what weapon he can use against Prospero. Gino admits he's afraid. He's afraid of the Red Death. He's afraid of Prospero and his castle. The Red Death, who has been laying tarot cards, hands him one. "I give you a sign," he says. Gino takes the card and asks what it means. "Mankind," says the man in red.
And then Gino runs away without saying thank you. I don't blame him because that's pretty vague advice. And now we're with Alfredo and Hoptoad. Alfredo is trying on his period-accurate gorilla suit, with Hoptoad there to warn him that he may find it a little warm, but not for long. He promises Alfredo that he can take the costume off for the unmasking, but not before. Then Hoptoad leads Alfredo to a mirror to show him his reflection and instructs him on how to walk like an ape. Hoptoad declares himself Alfredo's keeper and tells him to obey as he cracks his whip.
As Gino is wandering through the forest, he comes across some of the villagers on their way to the castle. They say they're going to ask the forgiveness of the prince. To the house of Satan? Inquires Gino. Better than the Red Death, says one of the men. Gino tries to get them to stop, but they ignore him and soldier onward.
Dragging their dead bodies behind them. Now we see Juliana in a red velvet gown. She drinks from a goblet of LSD-laced blood and starts to trip. She has some aquamarine-tinged hallucinations, where she sees some exotic dancers from various ancient religions writhing around her as the horns scream.
She awakens in the black room. My master, Satan, she says, and Prospero's laughter echoes throughout the chamber. I am betrothed to the devil, says Juliana, and I have seen the terrors. Not all of them, says the voice of Prospero. Juliana goes into the white room. I have survived my own sacrifice, she says. There is more, says the voice of Prospero. She enters the violet room and the yellow room, then out into the main hall, where the pendulum on the large clock swings.
Then a raven appears and starts to peck her to death as Prospero and his guests arrive into the hall. A guest sees Juliana's prone body covered in blood and screams, but Prospero says to celebrate Juliana, not mourn her, because she just married a friend of his.
By now, the traveling villagers have arrived at the castle and are hoping to gain entry to escape exposure to the Red Death. The head guard tells one of his men to inform Prospero of this turn of events, as it might amuse him. Gino is with the villagers and begs them to keep their dignity and, if they must die, let them die like human beings. You've not seen the Red Death, says one of the men, and you've not seen the dungeons of Prospero, counters Gino.
So he's going to leave, but before he goes, he tries to bring the one remaining small child with him, but her father claims her.
Excuse me, says a man in the crowd. That's my daughter you got there.
The father says that he must give his daughter every chance. Gino knows when he's been defeated and runs off.
Why does the rabbit run? Shouts one of the guards. That one fears Prospero more than the Red Death, scoffs another. Just then Prospero comes out, and the villagers ask that he show them mercy. They say they can't go back. They are certain to die from the Red Death. Prospero replies, then if you are to die, you can die right here. And he orders his archers to shoot them all, but not the child.
One of the archers tells Prospero, but she's as good as dead anyways. But Prospero just repeats, not the child. They do as ordered and execute all the men of the village. At the Masque, Prospero casts pearls and gowns onto the ballroom floor, and the guests fall to their knees and scoop up the swag. Prospero marvels to Francesca that these men and women of wealth would scramble around like starving people looking for a crust of bread. Francesca doesn't care about that, though. She's concerned about the villagers, and Prospero explains how he killed them. And she's once again shocked for no good reason. She should know better by now.
Gino has returned to the castle and is rappelling up the side to the battlement. When he gets there, the man in red is waiting for him. Gino doesn't know how he's going to sneak into the castle itself to rescue Francesca. The man in red points to a fallen guard on the ground. He appears to have suffered the Red Death. Gino looks up, but the man in red has disappeared.
And now we're in Esmeralda's chamber where she's practicing her dance moves. Hoptoad is also there. He warns Esmeralda not to come to the Masque tonight and vows that tonight they will escape. He says the Red Death is preferable to staying there.
The masquerade is now in full swing when Alfredo as the Great Ape makes his appearance. Hoptoad tells everyone to have no fear. He can control this beast. Armed with his whip, he subdues the beast. As the crowd erupts into laughter, Hoptoad unties a chandelier to bring it to the ground and ties Alfredo in the ape suit to the chandelier and raises it just above the ground. Let me down, cries Alfredo. He threatens Hoptoad, but Hoptoad says that Alfredo's already done the worst he could do when he threatened his Esmeralda. Then Hoptoad jumps on the table, saying that the ape wants some brandy. He splashes brandy over Alfredo's back, then he lights it on fire. The laughter in the room dies down as the smoldering man in the gorilla suit dies a horrible death. Hoptoad scurries out of the room. Prospero tells Francesca that he's noticed that she no longer turns away from life's horrors. I no longer care, she says. Her life is over. What little is left she is giving to Prospero tonight. Prospero tells the guards to clean up the mess. He can't have his guests dancing around a dead man in a gorilla suit. Actually, he said that. And tells his men that when they find Hoptoad, to give him 5 gold coins as a reward for his amusing jest.
But then everyone is back to normal levels of sociopathic behavior. Prospero demands that everyone dance, and they do, and then cries out in anger as he sees a lone costume in the forbidden color of red. He and Francesca chase this person through the castle. They finally catch up to him in the black room.
As Francesca stands by, Prospero tries to determine the identity of the man in red. The man's voice sounds familiar.
Is it Dottore Bernelli?
But it's not Bernelli. No, says the man. He's dancing in the white room, but I passed close by him. Prospero thinks he's figured it out. He tells Francesca to get to her knees. Their master has come.
Prospero starts getting self-righteous, assuming that this is Satan, but it isn't.
I would like to see your face, says Prospero. There is no face of death until you face your own death, says the man in red. I am but one of many messengers. Who do you come for? All? Asked Prospero. Not all, says the man.
And then the clock strikes midnight. It is the time of unmasking. Everyone will show their naked faces. The man in red, Francesca, and Prospero will return to the party for a new dance, the dance of death. They go to the main hall, where they see that every dancer is coated in red. It's the Red Death, and you can see it on their faces, their arms, their hands. Prospero feels that he's served Satan well, delivering him all these souls. The dancers continue carousing. Prospero begs Death, or the devil, whoever it is, to spare Francesca, and the man in red is impressed. A rare charitable offer from Prospero, he chuckles.
The man in red tells Francesca to go to the battlements, and Prospero says he will join her when this is over. She kisses him on the cheek and delicately makes her way through the infected to safety. Thank you, Your Excellency, says Prospero. I have no title, says the man in red. Why do you call me Excellency? Well, I thought as a minion of Satan, starts Prospero. Death has no master, says the man. But Satan rules all, protests Prospero. He does not rule alone, says the man. And your pact with Satan will not save you.
Prospero declares that there is no God. The man in red said that each man must make a god, a heaven, a hell for himself. Prospero declares that he simply must unmask the man in red, and he pulls the cowl away from his face. And for once he's speechless. He sees his own face, albeit one dyed red, looking back at him.
The man in red calls the moment of Prospero's death. No, cries out Prospero, as the diseased guests surround him and start clawing at him, and death comes to all within the castle. But Prospero still stands. He tries to flee by retreating to the Black Room, but the Red Death is already there. Why should you be afraid to die, he asks. Your soul has been dead for a long time.
And now we're outside the village near that tree where the movie began. The man in red takes a card from the little village girl. And then the two of them are joined by other incarnations of death, in black, in yellow, in blue, purple, white. And then the man in red explains who survived the film. He doesn't name names, but we can guess it was Gino, Francesca, Esmeralda, Hoptoad, the little girl we see before us, and the old man in the village. Then he says, Sic transit gloria mundi.
Then the deaths line up single file and head out as the title card reads, And darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. Edgar Allan Poe.
And then the credits roll. Then we see animation of a hand placing black tarot cards onto a red table.
The credits end as the final card is revealed, L'amour.
And that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're attending the Masque of the Red Death from 1964.
In February of 1961, it was announced in the Los Angeles Mirror that Roger Corman had hired Charles Beaumont to write the screenplay for Masque of the Red Death, which Corman would produce and direct for Film Group after he completed Captain Nemo and the Floating City. This would be Corman's 7th Poe film for AIP and his first filmed in England. The film was announced as being in the planning stages in a listing in the October 14, 1961 issue of the LA Evening Citizen News. It wasn't until November of 1963 that the film was listed as being before the cameras.
While Corman succeeded in getting his adaptation to the screen, he faced competition from two rival adaptations of The Masque of the Red Death, one from Woolner Brothers and one from producer Alex Gordon. In Philip Schur's column, published October 6, 1961, he quotes a spokesperson from Woolner Brothers as saying, Having deferred to Roger Corman on rights to Poe's premature burial, they will defer to no one on Poe's Masque of the Red Death, end quote. On that same day in Daily Variety, Alex Gordon claimed that he had signed Vincent Price for his version of the movie. A January 10, 1964 Variety article announced that he had filed an injunction against the release of Corman's film on accusations of plagiarism.
In December of 1962, Paul Nathan, writing for Publishers Weekly, said, One can't help wondering just what kind of tax bracket Edgar Allan Poe would find himself in today if he'd been born into our era of literary big business. Roger Corman has announced that The Masque of the Red Death will roll early next year, with the biggest budget yet for a picture in this series, $1 million.
Ooh.
The article said that AIP is on record as being prepared to bring back Corman in 10 more Poe chillers.
10? Wow. Based on what? In an interview published in the introduction of the Masque of the Red Death novelization by Elsie Lee, Corman told interviewer Lawrence French that he finally agreed to film an adaptation of Masque of the Red Death because he had used up all the other suitable Poe stories, saying, quote, Yes, there were other Poe materials, but out of the remaining stories, the best one was Masque. But because Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal had come out a few years earlier and had some similar elements, I would always choose something else.
In the same interview, Corman disclosed that he wasn't happy with Beaumont's first draft, and so, quote, Bob Campbell came to London with me, where we worked on a rewrite. I always thought Bob did an excellent job. At the time, Chuck was in the United States and was very ill, so he was not able to come to England to collaborate on revising the script. Corman told Chris Alexander, author of Corman Poe, that it was Campbell who wove the Hoptoad subplot into the script.
In that same interview, Corman said that Samuel Z. Arkoff and James H. Nicholson suggested to Corman that the film could be made in England, as AIP had a co-production deal with Anglo Amalgamated. This meant the film could qualify for the Eadie levy and increase the budget. Though AIP films normally took more than 3 weeks to shoot, Masque was shot in a comparatively luxurious 5 weeks. Corman said, though, that due to union restrictions, the likes of which he often bypassed in the States, 5 weeks in England was roughly the equivalent of 4 in the United States. Still, even a small amount of extra time allowed me to do a lot more stylistically with this production.
Because of the requirements for receiving Edie Levy funds, Corman had to leave his usual cinematographer Floyd Crosby in America and work with Nicholas Roeg. Masque was one of the first films Roeg shot in color. He also used Daniel Haller as production designer, but could not give him a credit in the film, and, according to the Lawrence French interview, gave George Willoughby a producer credit when Corman was the film's actual producer.
We saw Daniel Haller's name in the credits, so I don't know if that was because it was a home version and not theatrical. Daniel Haller's not in the AIP press book. Although some sources say that the sets for Masque were leftovers from the British film Beckett, according to the AIP press book, they were built at the Associated British Picture Corporation studios in Elstree and designed by Bob Jones, costing over $200,000. In addition to the lavish palatial rooms, over 2 miles of corridors were constructed in sections, spreading over 3 miles, for the scenes in which Jane Asher runs through Prospero's palace. 10 torture chambers were built for the dungeon scenes, accessorized with thumbscrews, iron maidens, flails, racks, and torture chairs. 300 feet of plastic cobwebs were spread over the area, and many pints of fake blood were used in the mask ball scene. Jones was quoted in the press book as saying, "The biggest challenge came in creating sets, visualized completely in terms of color, without using any shades in the red spectrum."
The Masque of the Red Death was 17-year-old Jane Asher's American film debut. The AIP press book plays up her relationship with then 22-year-old Paul McCartney, calling her that Beatle girlfriend. The press book also called her a junior spokeswoman for her generation in England on new trends in pop music, due to her appearance on British television programs like Jukebox Jury. Asher began acting at the age of 5 in the British film Mandy.
Though diminutive adult actor Skip Martin was hired to play Hop Toad, Corman told Chris Alexander that he was unable to find an adult dwarf actress to play the dancer Esmeralda. He said, "We interviewed and auditioned many little actresses in London, and none of them had the delicate quality we needed for the part. Instead, he used a young girl, aged her with makeup and costuming to appear older, and looped her dialogue with the voice of an adult actress." Corman said that this was an uncontroversial move at the time.
Peter J. Jarman of the Exeter Daily Express and Echo paid a visit to the Masque set during filming and reported that in the Masque scene, there was a band of minstrels that had been dubbed the Beatles by the film's crew. And just to add to the fun, the day I was there, a couple of the real Beatles were on set paying a visit.
Despite plans for a 1963 release, production on Masque of the Red Death was repeatedly delayed as Corman prioritized other Poe projects for AIP, such as Premature Burial and Tales of Terror in 1962, and The Haunted Palace and the Raven released in 1963, according to Variety.
The Masque of the Red Death was released in the United States and United Kingdom on June 24, 1964. In the UK, Masque was paired with X, the Man with the X-Ray Eyes, in some theaters.
AIP's press book suggested that theater owners create masks using the art for Masque of the Red Death, Price's face with dozens of writhing, barely clothed bodies depicted in lurid red. Also recommended was a person dressed in red, like the mysterious figure in red from the film, walking through the streets around the theater carrying a sign reading, "Beware of the Red Death." And they encouraged theaters to sponsor their own Masque of the Red Death Ball for local teenagers, requiring the youthful attendees to wear masks and menacing costumes, to be sponsored by local merchants or youth organizations. A costume contest with the winners paraded through the theater on opening night was another idea. Taglines for Masque of the Red Death include, "See the newest and scariest film of that master storyteller, Edgar Allan Poe."
Stare into this face. Count if you can the orgies of evil.
Look into this face. Shudder at the blood-stained dance of the Red Death. Tremble to the hideous tortures of the catacombs of Kali. Gasp at the sacrifice of the innocent virgin to the vengeance of Baal.
Behind a black door, beneath a blood-red window of a horror-haunted castle, half madman, half monster, it waits for those whose turn has come.
Vincent Price as the evil prince in 12th century Italy, his most diabolical role.
The U.S. Catholic League of Decency declared Masque of the Red Death to be morally objectionable in part for all. William Mooring, in his expanded review, wrote, "This might have been transformed into an allegory of good in contest with evil had not lurid sensationalism been the main objective." And said about the film's artwork, luridly advertised, one wonders how Price dares again look in a mirror. Still, it has little if anything to offer the reasonably discriminating, alert picturegoer.
Time magazine's review said Masque dusts off a trifling Poe classic and adapts it to fit the collected smirks of Vincent Price. In this elegant, elongated movie version, Prospero is a Satanist who scourges the entire 12th century countryside, tortures peasants, tries to corrupt a village maid, and lets his pet dwarf barbecue a guest. Fortunately, by the time death gets to the party, most of the nicer people have fled.
Eugene Archer of the New York Times wrote, "The film is vulgar, naive, and highly amusing, and it is played with gusto by Mr. Price, Hazel Court, and Jane Asher. On its level, it is astonishingly good."
Box Office Magazine's review said, "The screenplay is excessively talky at times and weirdly unbelievable, but it holds a strange fascination and winds up with a magnificent costume ball. The combination of the gory color on the faces of the dancers inflicted with the Red Death plague and the ghastly special effects, as magnificently photographed by Nicholas Roeg, make for a truly shocking climax. Hazel Court is outstanding, but Jane Asher fails to impress as a frightened heroine.
Dick Richards in the London Daily Mirror wrote, "The plot is a bit rickety, but much of the film has distinct style. The ball sequence is beautifully directed and photographed. The film will not horrify any right-minded citizen, but it does supply some mildly amiable chills, and not too many laughs in the wrong places."
James Mead in the Torrance California Daily Breeze wrote, "Once again, Price is deliciously and disdainfully easy as he tries to get his associates to worship his own master, Satan. Jane Asher is appealing as a peasant girl who stirs some compassion in Price's hard heart. Except for a cardboard castle and long shots, American International has given this color film top production values. Director Roger Corman continues to improve so much, one wishes he would attempt another genre."
Douglas Goodlad in the Leicester Chronicle wrote, "With Masque of the Red Death, to my taste one of the chilliest Poe stories, Corman gives us a gorgeously Baroque visual treat as well as the customary brooding threat. Vincent Price, playing the role of the demon-haunted Prince Prospero, treads his usual line between sardonic humor and sheer eye-rolling farce without losing his balance. It's good fun."
But the review in the Surrey Mirror and County Post, titled Red Death Razzle Dazzle, roasted the film, saying, "It's a pity that Britain's film industry, which is complaining about a lack of money and facilities to show its film, has not got anything better to do than turn out senile tripe such as this offering. No wonder people would rather stay home and watch television." It actually was a really funny review, but I couldn't include all of it.
Logan Pope in the Louisville Courier-Journal called the film shoddy and revolting, writing, "In The Masque of the Red Death, Poe described a hideous plague and asserted that the whole seizure, progress, and termination of the disease were the incident of half an hour. The new Vincent Price movie is not so merciful. Its torments are sustained an hour longer. Poe's Masque was a simple 5-page story that seemed to warn that a fatal disease strikes down rich and poor, noble and peasant indiscriminately. Corman's expanded version is a tasteless monstrosity that exploits sadism, torture, and sexual depravity in full gory color, and then has the nerve to disguise the cheap sensationalism with a religious morality theme. Corman, in 7 screen adaptations of Poe, has never learned the difference between terror and revulsion."
Finally, the unnamed reviewer for the Ely and Acton Gazette called Masque 1964's best film so far. And this was in July, saying, "With Masque of the Red Death, Roger Corman comes fully into his own, whereas his earlier adaptations were no more than stylish but uneven romps. This new film compels us to take Corman completely seriously. It is surely his best film to date, the most disciplined, yet the most imaginative, the most exceptionally professional, and the most brilliant. It is, in fact, the nearest thing to a minor masterpiece I've encountered in horror movies."
Despite getting some good reviews, Masque of the Red Death was not as big a hit as some of the other Poe movies produced by Corman. Corman said that Sam Arkoff later dismissed the film as being too arty-farty and not frightening enough. Corman later called that a legitimate statement, saying he was more interested in Poe films as expressions of the unconscious mind rather than pure horror films. However, Corman considers the film among his favorites.
Dell Comics published an adaptation of Masque of the Red Death for their Movie Classics series with art by Frank Springer. It was published in August of 1964 and cost 12 cents.
The Masque of the Red Death was preserved by the Academy Film Archive in 2019.
A 1989 adaptation of Masque of the Red Death was written and directed by Larry Brand. The cast included British actors Patrick Macnee and Adrian Paul. Did The Masque of the Red Death strike you as being markedly different from Corman's other Poe adaptations that we've seen so far?
Oh, definitely, in that this one seems a lot more ambitious. And I agree with Sam Arkoff that it is a little arty-farty, but that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. But maybe it was for audiences that they were trying to attract back in 1964. What strikes me is that it's not as funny as, let's say, The Terror, but it's a lot more interesting and engaging than House of Usher, even though they're both on the same level of seriousness.
Yeah, but this deals with a more abstract thing and gives a personification of disease, which is a really interesting approach. I'm not familiar with the Poe story. This is one I don't think I've ever read, so I don't know how that originally played in the story.
Maybe we should have read it before we started. It's only 5 pages. If it was only 5 pages, they had to stretch out and add a lot to the story that wouldn't have been in Poe's original, not just the subplot of Hoptoad and Esmeralda, which came from an entirely different story.
And I thought that was one of the highlights of the movie, so I think that was a good idea to include that because so many of the Poe stories were so short that AIP brought those elements into other movies, which really works. We saw that with Tales of Terror when they combined the idea of the black cat with the cask of Amontillado.
That's true, and that was only 1/3 of the movie. That wasn't an entire film. So really, they're taking 4 stories for Tales of Terror and making one movie out of it in 3 different episodes. So here we've got one story with another story woven into it, and then just expanded to meet the requirement of how long a film needed to be.
And I think it works really well in this regard because the story of Hop Toad, which was Hop Frog originally, I don't think I could carry an entire movie on its own, but it's an interesting subplot in this movie.
It seems like the Hop Toad subplot wouldn't even qualify for a third of a movie. So having it here, I think it fits in perfectly. I will say that this film is probably more visually interesting than any other Corman movie we've seen so far. Not just Poe, but Corman movie.
I would agree. The castle sets in this are really impressive. The village, not so much. And the carriage, definitely not. It kind of looks like a cardboard outhouse on wheels. It's so small, but the castle sets are impressive.
Yes, especially the different colored rooms. All the rooms look the same except for the color, but they're so ornate within that restriction. There's a lot of detail. And then we have the other rooms of the castle, the Great Hall, the torture chambers, the dungeons, Juliana's bedroom. They seem to put a lot of care into those, especially with the color. Color is practically another character in this movie. I mean, actually, it's like 6 characters.
Yeah, besides the deaths, the different colored rooms, every time they walk into it, it's kind of striking because the room is so yellow and so white and so purple and so black.
It's almost like a mood. Every room is a different mood, which makes it especially diabolical that Prospero's father imprisoned a man in the yellow room, which should be like a happy, sunny room, and kept him there so long that he could no longer bear to look at the sun or anything yellow. Very cruel.
There's a lot of cool things in this movie, but there are some things that just don't work. I think the most notable one is the casting of the little girl as Esmeralda.
Yeah, that is so weird. And I don't know how people interpreted that in 1964 because they can't have known the backstory of why this dwarf man is squiring around a little girl and why adult men at a ball are staring lustfully at a little girl. Could they have known that she's not meant to be a little girl without the one scene where we finally hear her speak?
I didn't.
No, not until I told you.
Well, there is another scene that is in the extended cut, that isn't in the AIP cut that we reviewed, where Hop Toad goes to Esmeralda and they have a discussion about what just transpired. And of all the footage that is in the extended cut, that's the only one that is an entire scene. There's other elongated scenes, but that's the only additional scene.
Oh, that might have been very helpful to people.
But even hearing that voice come out of her is unnerving.
Yeah, it doesn't fit. I guess that's what they had to do, but it sounds like maybe he didn't try very hard to find an actual little person to play that role.
Well, you have to find a little person who can dance.
He did mention that in one or two of the interviews. It's just so creepy watching Vincent Price and the guy who played Alfredo visually and audibly lusting over her and how they want to corrupt her innocence. It's just gross. I kind of thought the character of Juliana was wasted too. She only interacted with Francesca and Prospero intermittently, and the rest of the time she's basically talking to herself, even though she thinks she's talking to Satan.
Yeah, and that was kind of a disappointment to me too, because it's Hazel Court, who I was looking forward to seeing in this film.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was scheduled to be a guest at Monster Bash one year that I was going, and she passed away right before, as the guests tend to do. I never got the chance to meet her.
That's too bad. She should have interacted with the guests. She should have behaved like his real consort. Because Vincent Price takes up all the oxygen in any room he's ever in. Even saying that, though, his performance here was kind of restrained.
I guess so. I didn't see him as being restrained. I thought he seemed right at home in this one.
I don't mean restrained as in he was awkward or anything. I mean, he wasn't loud. He wasn't showy.
No, I know what you mean, because that's how I would describe his performance in War Gods of the Deep, where it was really low key. And it seemed to me like he was just phoning that one in.
No, I thought this was a more controlled, mannered performance, but I didn't feel like he was phoning it in.
No, not in this case. Definitely not. He's a Satanist. I think this is one that he's probably having a little bit of fun with.
Yes, but when I say restrained, I just mean he's not out there twirling his mustache and just very quietly being evil.
I don't know how this was originally supposed to be projected, but I did notice there's one scene. It's a tracking shot where Vincent Price is walking across the hall to the big clock, and the edges look like they're curved.
Mm-hmm, I noticed that too. It's a little disorienting.
Made me a little dizzy watching it. So I don't know if this was meant to be projected on a curved screen or something. That's what it looked like.
But none of the other scenes seemed to do that. It was just that one scene. I thought maybe he was walking around in a circle.
Well, even if he did, it should still look flat on the edges, and it didn't, because it would be kind of out of focus and come into focus as it got to the center of the screen.
Unfortunately, the commentary in this movie was no help with that for us.
All in all, I think that this was a really ambitious project, and definitely more than we'd expect to see from Roger Corman. Nothing against Roger Corman. I love Roger Corman.
Me too.
But this was on the verge of being high art, and that's not what you expect, because he's known as a Slackmeister.
His movie production style is really fast and dirty. Turn on the camera, turn it off, get him out. He doesn't want to spend a lot of time crafting a film. But this time, I think he really did. He had more time because of the union rules in the UK, so he had to spread out the production over a longer period of time. And he himself admitted he could do a lot more that way.
Yeah, and I think it definitely helped the film. This is a pretty impressive work.
It's really beautiful. And it's also one that takes on concepts that I don't normally see in movies from that era, such as does God exist? And if he does exist, why does he allow evil? And that there are so many people who choose to worship differently. I don't really see that in older movies where both perspectives are given equal weight, believers and non-believers.
Yeah, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the films that Corman did tend to have some autobiographical elements in it. So these are probably questions he's been asking himself at the same time.
Well, a lot of people ask them, but it's just not socially acceptable to voice them. So it almost had a cerebral element to it, as well as being visually enticing.
And the final image of the film before the credits with all the colored deaths walking silently and single file off screen. That's kind of a really cool but eerie image.
Yeah, I never saw The Seventh Seal. I know a little bit about it. It's the one where Death plays chess. I think Corman was trying very hard not to find that influence, but I think they deal with a lot of the same thing thematically. The personification of death and how that would look on screen.
Yeah, it's been over 30 years since I've seen The Seventh Seal. I saw it in film school back in the day, but I can say that you're probably right there.
I don't know what else was released in 1964, but could this really have been the best film of 1964 for that one reviewer?
Well, in terms of film, as opposed to movie, it probably was. A Hard Day's Night came out in 1964, featuring Jane Asher's boyfriend.
That's funny. She looks like a little girl in this too. Not as young as the little dancer Esmeralda, but she seems very, very young here. And she's 17. So I was also not too keen on Vincent Price and Patrick Magee lusting after her either.
The age of consent in England is 16.
Doesn't matter. You have 40, 50-year-old men ogling a teenage girl.
Yeah, it's still not cool, but it's not illegal.
It doesn't have to be illegal to be wrong. A lot of legal things were immoral.
And in the 11th century, it probably wasn't even 17. It's probably even younger than that.
I know a lot of stories from history about 11-year-olds being married off or 13-year-olds being married off to secure the dynasty, but still.
So a lot of the stuff that may make us feel uncomfortable today watching it, in the times that the story takes place, and even in the 1960s, it probably wasn't as bad as it is today, where everything is very PC.
Okay, I'll give you that, except for the little girl.
Well, even Corman said that it wasn't problematic back then, but...
The casting, not the...
Oh, yeah, the casting of the girl, yeah. There's no way that that girl resembles a little person. She looks like a little girl. So I can understand what they're going for in retrospect, but it definitely didn't work.
No, it didn't. There's a big ick factor there. Well, now it's time to render our judgment on The Masque of the Red Death using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic. Jeff, how would you rate The Masque of the Red Death?
I think Masque of the Red Death is a pretty impressive film. Besides the color working for it, it's just a beautiful film. The humor isn't as noticeable as in some others, as you mentioned, but what is there is kind of bizarre. Like when Prospero is going to the party guests and making them all act like animals. That's just so weird, but it's fun. It's probably the most fun thing in this movie besides the Hop Toad subplot, because it's just so in contrast to what's happening in the rest of the film, where it's all dealing with Satanism and plague and things that generally aren't as much fun. And I thought this might not be the most fun AIP movie ever made. It's a very, very good film. So in terms of entertainment, it delivers, but it's one of those ones that you don't put on to escape anything. You're going to watch just because it's a good movie, not because you're trying to have a good time watching it. But I'm still going to give this one an A. I thought it was awesome all the way, and one that I will definitely watch again. What are your thoughts, Cheryl?
I'm in agreement that this is definitely an A movie. No suspense there. It's entertaining to watch, and not because, like Tales of Terror, was very funny and really good time. This is a more serious take, and yet there are moments in the movie that will have you chuckling. I even laughed when Alfredo in the ape costume was torched because it was just sick humor, but that's still humor. So I enjoyed that, and he kind of deserved it, especially after lusting after a little girl. And just overall, like I said, this was a more cerebral film. I think it's the best of the Corman Poe adaptations so far. I know we have like 5 more to watch, but I think this is definitely the best one. I think that's going to be hard for any of the others to top this. We'll see. So yeah, it's an A for me.
Yeah, the ending of the movie at the party where everybody's dancing, obviously whatever happened didn't happen that way. It's kind of working as an allegory representing the disease, but I'm sure they weren't dancing around in slow motion while they turned red.
It was so visually striking, though. They actually kind of give us a little mask before they reveal all this. The camera gets blocked by something, a curtain, a tambourine or something, and then they lift that, and then we see the entire cast of extras, the partygoers, with their faces entirely red, but they are behaving normally, but in slow motion. They're dancing around. And then they eventually converge on Prospero, almost overwhelming him. He does pop up after they fall to the floor, but it's very beautiful, if that's possible.
Artsy, yeah.
In an artistic way. And it's also terrifying. We didn't mention that before, but that scene alone is worth the price of admission.
And the fact that We have the Red Death wandering around the castle and speaking with Prospero.
His voice is so, and obviously they reveal him as Vincent Price, but the actor who plays him until that reveal and does the voice throughout, his intonations are so deep and quietly powerful. It's a really good performance.
And again, that can't be how it actually happened.
Well, we saw the old woman die at the beginning and she wasn't dancing.
I don't even think it's supposed to work as a hallucination. It's a play that's put on for the audience.
For us.
Yeah.
And I like that they trusted the audience to interpret that and understand it.
Well, Corman did. I doubt that Arkoff and Nicholson had as much faith.
I meant Corman and the writers, so I wasn't talking about the suits.
So while the mask in this week's film may have ended in disaster, the party continues over at AIPpod.com. That's our website where we're curating a museum of all things AIP. It's not only an archive where you can listen to all of our episodes, it's also your one-stop access point for information on the entire output from American International. It's a work in progress, but it's constantly being updated with new and valuable information, including posters, trailers, and lobby cards for the films. There's also a Help Us tab accessible from the homepage, where you can find a list of films we're still trying to track down to feature on future episodes of the podcast. If you can point us in the direction where we might get a hold of any of these titles, you can contact us via the handy contact form right there on the site. You can also use it to message us about anything else that might be on your mind, be it to request titles you'd like us to cover on the podcast or just to say hello. There are also links to our socials, as well as a link to our store. Any purchase of that link will help us bring you even more goodies through the podcast and the website. Remember, that's AIPpod.com.
Well, now that we've survived the party from hell, I think it's time that we get out of here. For the American International Podcast, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.